Hi everyone, my name is Denise and I am the librarian for the Bullhead City campus. Hopefully the audio is working. Today's virtual research workshop that we're doing is about how to read a research article. We are recording the session, so you will be able to also access the website and see it on there after we're done recording. The microphones are muted, but if you have any questions, there is a chat box that you can type into, and I'll keep an eye on the chat box to see if you have any questions. All right, so let's get started. So first of all, we're going to talk about how to establish the authorship and the credibility of an article before reading it, and then we're going to talk about each part of the research article and discuss how each part should be read. Then we're going to discuss the order in which the article should be read and why. And afterwards, we are going to review some key points. All right. So research articles, they're different from other texts like novels or magazines. And they should also be read differently. So you might recall in elementary English class that you learn the basic narrative structure of literature. There's usually a beginning, a middle, and an end. Research papers don't follow this structure. Reading a research article linearly from title to references, one section after another, is neither the most efficient nor the most useful method of reading. All right, before you begin, throughout the presentation, we're going to be looking at an example of a research paper titled Emotion Dysregulation Mediates the Relation Between Borderline Personality Disorder Symptoms and Later Physical Health Symptoms. That's a mouthful. And that was randomly selected from EBSCO. So before you read the article, you want to read the title carefully. So here we have emotion dysregulation mediates the relation between borderline personality disorder symptoms and later physical health symptoms. Titles of articles may be more or less descriptive of the study than this one. In this example, the article title concisely states the conclusion of the study. All titles should convey some sense of what the article is about. You want to take note of the authors in the article. You'll see, for example, right down here we have our authors listed, and there may be one or several authors. The first one listed is usually going to be the primary author of the study, and in some journals, a corresponding author may also be listed. And you also want to look at their institutional affiliations. Right here we can see the different universities that the authors are from. Articles should list them for each of the authors' work that they're representing. You also want to note any disclaimers and disclosures of funding and support because you want to make sure that it's not biased. So for example, this one is saying that the research was supported by the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development. So research is frequently funded by grants from government agencies or from private organizations. Studies that do not disclose such information are automatically suspect because that's information that should be given. It's worth your time to investigate the supporting organizations that you don't recognize to see if they have a potential agenda. So if you look and you don't recognize the name of an organization, you should go on and investigate it and see and make sure that it is a legitimate organization. Also, journals should include if there's a conflict of interest, and some journals will call it dualities of interest. That's a situation where one of the authors in the paper has a stake in the results turning out one way or the other. So that's something you need to be aware of. If you guys have any questions, I do have the chat. You should be able to type something in the chat box if you have anything additional. I'm just going to keep the windows with our views closed so that way you can see more of the PowerPoint. All right. So another thing before you read the article, you want to note the publication date of the article. Right here you can see this is 2017. More recent research may supersede older research, so you want to make sure that you pay close attention to the dates of publication if you're reading more than one article on a topic. You also want to take note of the journal in which it's published. You want to use library search tools to find credible journals. Find out whether or not the journal is peer-reviewed. You should always be aware of free articles and journals through Google searches, etc. So what I'm going to do is we are going to look at, I'm going to take us to the library homepage. And one of the ways that you can make sure that you have peer-reviewed articles is when you're on the library homepage, if you come to the EBSCO search box, you can go on and click on full text, and you can click on peer-reviewed. So now, whatever topic you type in here, the articles that come up will be peer-reviewed. For example, let's look at nursing education. We're going to put that in there and search. All right, so now we can see that we have 36,378 articles. All of them will be peer-reviewed. They're scholarly peer-reviewed. Another thing that you can do real quick, I'm just going to show you a couple little tricks to how you can actually get to a research article. So over here on the left-hand side where it has the year 1937, you do not want to use information that is this old unless you were talking about information in a historic sense. So you usually, with medical related articles, you usually want the most recent 5 years. So I'm going to change this to 2012. I'm going to hit enter, and this is going to update our search. So now we only have 11,978. Now we want to make sure that they're research articles. There's a couple components to research articles, and a quick way that you can find them is if you click method, asterisk, and results. And the reason for that, and we'll get into that in just a moment, is some of these sections in a research article are going to include the method, methods, or methodology section and the results section. So by typing METHOD, then you hold your shift key down and you hit the number 8, that puts this asterisk here. And that is a wild card. So that asterisk suddenly changes the word method to method, methods, or methodology. So now when we hit search, we are down to 1,998. So that is much more reasonable. So I'm just going to show you another step really quickly. If you are not sure how to find out if a journal is peer-reviewed, what you can do is you can type a journal into the search bar. For example, I'm going to put the American Journal of Nursing. If you put the title of the article, or excuse me, of the journal in the search bar, and then you want to actually come to the homepage for the journal itself, you want to look in the section that says about the journal. And somewhere in here, this is what we're looking for. It should say peer-reviewed. So that if you're not sure if a journal is peer-reviewed, you should be able to type it into your search box. And then you want to look in the section that says about the journal, and you want to look for the word peer-reviewed or peer-edited. All right. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask them. Otherwise, we will keep going. I'm going to go back over to the chat now and see if there are any questions. And I do not see any. So now we are going to go back to the PowerPoint. Oops, let me get back to where we were. All right, so if you're not sure what peer review is, what it is, it's the process by which academic work is checked by others working in the same field. So peer review occurs before an article is published in a journal, and it's generally done on a volunteer basis by experts in the field. It's usually not going to be done by journal editors or staff. It's going to be volunteers. And the articles will go through many rounds of peer review and revision. So for example, if you're a nursing student and you have written an article that has to do with nursing, and say it's something that is vitally important to get out into the nursing field, the reason that articles are peer reviewed, this way you would submit your article, your peers would review it, they'd look at your information, and they would stamp it with technically it's considered a seal of approval. So it's saying that anyone else that comes along and looks at these articles, that this is valid research, valid information. And so that is what the peer review is about. So when you initially read it, you want to get the big picture by reading the article title and keywords carefully. So when you look at the article, you're going to see major subjects and you're going to see minor subjects. So then you want to quickly skim the article and you want to focus on headings and subheadings. And you want to look at any terms and parts that you don't understand. The keywords and subjects can be found in EBSCO details pages, and some journals list keywords and articles. So if you skim through the article, it can give you the basic grasp of the article. This is important. As you read, write down every word that you don't understand. You're going to want to use your dictionary. Scientific words have very specific meanings, and you won't understand the paper if you don't understand the vocabulary. Sometimes it might also be necessary to do further background reading to understand some parts of a paper. So now we're going to look at the different parts of a research article. So research articles are commonly organized by the MIRD format. So the introduction, methods, results, and discussions. So a few moments ago when I showed you the search where we used method with the asterisk and results, since the search engine is looking for those two terms in a paper, that's one of the ways that helps us pull up actual research articles. So articles may omit, substitute, rename, or rearrange these basic parts. A research article will nonetheless contain all the information that they present. So the introduction, why was the study undertaken? What was the research question? The tested hypothesis or the purpose of the research? When, where, and how was the study done? That's going to be under the methods section. What materials were used or who was included in the study groups? The results. What answer was found to the research question? What did the study find? Was the tested hypothesis true? And the discussion. What might the answer imply and why does it matter? How does it fit in with other researchers, what they have found? What are the perspectives for future research? So these are the various parts. So the first one we're going to look at is the introduction. So what is the introduction? Introductions create interest in the article and provide readers with information to understand the article. So introductions lead readers from broad information, such as what is known about the topic, to more specific information, what is not known, to a focal point, what question or questions have the authors asked and answered. Now, when you read the introduction, start by reading the introduction, not the abstract. The abstract is an interpretation of the results. The abstract can be shaped by the authors to tell a more compelling story. And partially is you don't want to become inadvertently biased by reading the abstract, because the abstract is basically going to give you everything in a nutshell. So it's going to already give you possibly a preconceived idea of what the research shows. So by reading the introduction, it gives you a better idea of forming your own opinion. So the next thing you want to do is identify the big question. Not necessarily what is the paper about, but the big question. What problem is this entire field trying to solve? This is going to help you focus on why this research is being done. Quite often in a research paper, you're going to be able to find the hypothesis. Sometimes it's marked as like an H1 for hypothesis, or sometimes you'll just see where it is talking about the information that they're going to be looking at. There is a way, let me just look at one of these articles real quick. Quite often we can find, I'm just gonna, literature review. Okay, I'm just gonna grab an article here real quick. And we're gonna pull up the whole article. Quite often, not always, but quite often you're able to look at an article and you can find the hypothesis or the question. Let's see if this will pull up for us. Here we go. Quite often you can find your hypothesis or the question that the study is asking in the paragraph before the methods. So usually in your introduction paragraph or your introduction section, it's going to be in the last paragraph before methods. Now, not always. This is just a place to look for your research question. So right here it's telling us, based on these considerations, the present study aims to evaluate teaching strategies and peripheral venipuncture with university students. So right here it's telling us what the research is that they're trying to do. So that's just a little tip that sometimes that's a good place to look if you're trying to figure out where the research question or what it is that they're wanting to ask. All right. And then this is also going to put the research in context so you can also identify potential bias or agenda-motivated research. So the next thing you want to do is to try to summarize the background. The introduction is going to discuss the background of prior research. So authors are going to identify gaps in current research that stimulated the new research. So you want to look for keywords like the word despite. So right here, you want to try to summarize the background of the paper in a few sentences. This is going to force you to be concise and think about the context of this research. And you also want to consider some questions to guide your summary. What work has been done before in this field? What are the limitations of that work? What, according to the authors, need to be done next? So right here, they're using the word despite. So here they're telling you, what others have researched, but then here it's saying notably, despite robust empirical support, then it's telling you where it's lacking in information. And a lot of times that's maybe where you want to do your research. So next you want to identify the specific questions, also known as the hypothesis. And there may be multiple ones or there may just be one. And they may be stated subtly, like here, thus the heightened emotion dysregulation associated with BPD may be one mechanism underlying the worst physical health outcomes in this population, or it may be very explicit. We hypothesized that BPD symptoms would predict greater physical health symptoms 8 months later, above and beyond other baseline predictors, and that the relation of BPD symptoms to later physical health symptoms would be indirect through emotion dysregulation. Specific questions or hypotheses may start with maybe or we hypothesize. So it's a thorough reading of the introduction is important to understand them. Authors may justify investigating the hypothesis by referring to those gaps in the existing research. So now, what are the authors going to do to answer those specific questions? The approach is typically given at the end of the introduction and serves as a summary of the methods used in the study. So for example, they're saying here, to this end, we examine the unique relation of baseline BPD symptoms. So once again, look in that last paragraph after of the introduction, or like the paragraph right before the method or methodology section. So now we're going to talk about the methods. So what are the methods? Method refers to the technical details of how studies were designed and carried out. Method includes information about the number of subjects in the study, sampling methods, the variables used, and statistical functions applied to the data. You want to look for the words like case study, observational study, randomized trial, and so on to determine the design of the research. So right here it's talking about the participants and also the different measures. The methods section can be challenging to read. However, it's important to understand the basics. Attempt to summarize and explain the basic methods before moving on to results. It's unnecessary to understand the methods in enough detail to replicate the experiment, but you're not ready to move on to the results until you can explain the basics of the methods to someone else. through most of, when you're analyzing a research paper, it's a good idea as you're going through each section to write it in your own words, so that if someone said, hey, can you tell me about the introduction to this paper? If you could write it in your own words, just a short paragraph, and if you do that as you go through the paper, then you have a nice summarized idea of what the paper is about. So you also want to look at the size of the study, because that can make a difference to your research. What was the size and length of the study? How many subjects were studied? How long was the data collected? Over what geographic area are the subjects distributed? For example, participants completed 3 assessments separated by 4-month increments over an 8-month period. To be included in the current study, participants had to complete all 3 assessments. So here it's telling us that there were 151 women that were recruited from a metropolitan area in the southern United States. So here it's telling us that they were women, that they were recruited, and that they were from a metropolitan area in the southern United States. So that's good to know the different information. So the methods of gathering data. Was the data gathered clinically? Was it gathered in a laboratory? Was it self-reported? So research the data gathering methods used and learn about their advantages and disadvantages. Depending on if it was gathered clinically or in a laboratory or self-reported, depending on the type of study, that can make a difference. So how did they select their subjects? What type of people were included? Who was excluded? How were they invited to participate? Thinking about how subjects were invited to participate in the study is an important part of determining if a study shows certain biases, such as self-selection bias, because you don't want to use a study where the people picked the people that they were going to use in the study, because then it's not an unbiased. You also want to know if any money was given, whether they had an interest, or if there was a certain way that they had an incentive to participate. So understanding the methods, another thing you can do is draw a diagram or flow chart that's going to describe the study's methods. This will help you get a visualization of how it's laid out. The questions to ask yourself: did the researchers choose the right subjects? Did they choose the right variables? Do the procedures make sense? And what was the data collection process? Was it logical? And can you really identify potential for error? If a study has easily identifiable error-prone methods, such as a small sample size, over-reliance on self-reported data, etc., keep that in mind as you evaluate it. Next, we're going to look at the results section. So what are the results? The results give specifics about the collected data. Data is often organized into tables and charts. When you're looking at a study, you should get to a section where there's going to be a lot of information about, you should have tables and graphs and charts that are going to give you information about the data. Understanding the results. What you want to do, once again, is you want to write a brief summary of the results for each experiment and a study. Don't try to figure out what those results mean yet. You want to pay attention to any time the words significant or non-significant are used. It may be necessary to find supplemental results data online. So if you're looking at the results to the data, you might need to go online to get additional information. You also want to determine how the authors may have adjusted the data with statistical models. And look up these models and learn their advantages and disadvantages. It's going to be time intensive when you look at a research article, because there are going to be a lot of terms used that you do not understand. There's going to be a lot of methods that you do not understand. So you need to take the time to look into these terms and these methods and understand how they work. So significant and non-significant have precise scientific meanings. A paper should indicate whether there's supplemental data available online. So some articles you look at, it may say data availability statement on all of its articles. The statistical details of many studies can be extremely complex, but it's worth your time to learn the basics. So understanding the results, you want to pay specific attention to the labels and units on charts and graphs. So you want to look at the top and the bottom of the graphs, and you want to look at the keys for the graphs and see exactly what it is it's trying to tell you. You want to look for error bars on graphs, the range of values in the charts, the legend and the footnotes, and the sample size. Does it match the sample size reported in the methods section? If not, is there an explanation? So if it's showing you in the methods section, if it's saying that there were 47 in the sample size, but when you look at the results section, it says 22, then you need to find out why there's a discrepancy in the two numbers. In certain types of studies, error bars that are missing from graphs is a big red flag that the data may not be reliable. Certain types of studies you're going to have error bars. So testing the hypothesis, recall the specific questions you already identified. Do the results answer the specific questions? Try to form your own interpretation before reading the author's conclusions. So remember at the beginning we were saying don't read the abstract to begin with, because that's going to already possibly give you preconceived ideas instead of forming your own. And keep in mind there are a lot of different ways to read research articles. This is just one particular way. So however your instructor tells you how to do it, or if you find a way that works better for you. But this is a good way, this system is a good way to do it, so that way you haven't already formed your opinion. You're reading the information about the research through, I guess we could call through clean eyes. It's okay to change your mind when you read the author's interpretation, but get in the habit of forming your own interpretation first. So now the discussion section. So what is the discussion? It may also be called the conclusion or interpretation. Functions to provide a clear answer to the question or questions posed in the introduction. It explains how the results support the conclusion. It also draws comparisons between its own conclusions and that of other research on the topic. It may also identify weaknesses or infer about why the results were different than expected. And it indicates the possible direction of future research. So here it's talking about, although the results of the study highlight one mechanism that may underlie the association between BPD symptoms and poor physical health outcomes, several limitations warrant consideration. So here it's talking about limitations or weaknesses. So here it's talking about future research. So future research examining this model among older adults as well as individuals with physical health problems is needed. Such research may help elucidate the role of BPD symptoms and physical health problems among individuals at greatest risk for poor physical health outcomes. So understanding the discussion, quickly summarize what the authors think the results mean. How does this compare to your own interpretation? If your interpretation doesn't match the author's, why not? Does the conclusion answer the specific question or questions? Think about why or why not. Do you see any evidence of bias in the author's research? Now, how to read the article. When reading academic writing, always read actively and read critically. So active reading a research paper is an active, not a passive process. Reading a research article is not simply about learning facts. Taking notes, asking questions, and looking at terms and topics you don't understand are part of the active reading process. Reading actively will help you understand the paper better. Critical reading. Don't assume the authors of a paper are correct about everything. Papers that are well organized, written by qualified people, and use all the correct jargon can still contain bad information. Sometimes you may come across an article that says retracted written on it. That means they went back after the fact and there was some information found that was wrong or invalid. And it doesn't mean it was anything that they did wrong, it just means that quite often it can just be that future research proves that what they had stated was not correct or accurate. So to break down the steps to reading an article, first of all, you want to find out who the authors are, including check the institutional affiliations and the conflicts of interest. Next, you want to skip the abstract and you want to read the introduction. You want to identify the big question of this research field. You want to identify the specific questions this paper is trying to answer. Determine the approach. Then look up any terms you don't understand. You want to read the methods and summarize the methods used. Read the results and attempt to interpret the results. Read the discussion. Does your author's interpretation match yours? And now read the abstract. Does it fairly represent the paper? Would you have summarized the paper this way? And here are the steps to reading. As you read the paper in this order, ask yourself these questions. Keep notes and summarizing your understanding as you read. So the introduction, can you pull out what question the authors are asking? The methods, how do authors plan to answer it? Results, does the data answer the question? For the discussion, how do the authors say the data answers the question? For the abstract, do the authors attempt to frame the results differently than you would? Reading actively, taking notes, and summarizing every part of the article as you read it will help you understand the study, its methods, and how the authors came to the conclusion that they did. Taking an active part in understanding the articles you're reading and breaking it down reveals that every research article is a series of discrete parts that all have a simple method of reading rather than one dense mountain of text. Following these steps will ensure that you're getting the most out of the time you spend reading research articles, and they will also help you earn better grades. These are not rules to follow, but rather they're a way of thinking about research papers as structured texts. Following a guided approach to reading them that understands the structure will lead to better understanding. So the library has resources to help you learn better research skills, and we're always here to help. You can contact us through the library website at www.mojave.edu/library, or you can also email us at askalibrarian@mojave.edu. We have jellyfish just because. And here's our reference page that shows the references that we used in the PowerPoint presentation. All right, and at this time, I'll see if there are any questions. Okay, and I do not see any questions. So once again, thank you for joining us for the virtual research workshop on how to read a research article. The next one will be on November 14th, and that will be on how to create APA papers and citations. This will be uploaded to the library homepage, and I will show you real quick. When you're at the library, then you can come to the video tutorials, and then the virtual research workshop recordings, and this will get uploaded later today. All right, thank you and have a good day.